Christy, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be making a card using Sunny Studios Scaredy Cat and Harvest Mice. So I've stamped out the images I'll be using on some Nina Solar white cardstock with Lawn Fawn jet black ink, and I'll be coloring with my Copic markers. I'm starting with my kitty, and for the white parts of her fur I'm using C0 and C1. So I laid in a little shadow with that C1 and then blended that out with the C0 and let that fade into the white. I did the bottom part of her face, one ear, and one paw. And then for the black areas of her body, I'm using C5, C7, and C9. So that C9 is super dark, so I just laid in a little bit of that, and then I'm going to blend that out with the C7, and then I'll use the C5 for the highlight shade, and I'm just going to color carefully around her eye, as I don't want that to get any of that dark color in it. I'm also going to color in one of her paws almost completely. I'm going to leave a little tiny white space to fill in later, but I'm just going kind of diagonally across the body. So I did the top left patch and then the right paw. I just find that composition more balanced and it gives your eye more to look at with the different pops of color here and there. And then I'm going to do the same thing with this reddish brown patch. I'll do the patch on the right and then the left ear. And I'm also going to fill in that little white spot on the black paw. So I used E15, E17, and E19 for that so that she can be a little calico kitty. So I just started with the dark on the outside edge, just mirroring the black, and then blended towards the middle with the E17 and then the E15. I'll color her eyes green with YG25, and later I will use this shade to color in the pumpkin stems as well. I'm going to do her tongue with R22, and then I'm going to move on to the jack-o'-lantern. I'm using YR12, YR14, and YR18 for that. I'm starting with that YR18, and I'm going to define the edges both on the sides and the top and bottom. And I'm also going to just extend those little black lines that are drawn a little bit higher so it creates more contrast. So once I have those laid in all over from top to bottom, I'm going to come in with the YR14 and begin to blend that out. Just going to make sure that I'm catching the edge of that YR18, and then I'll take my marker and just do some flicking motions to kind of pull that color towards the middle of the jack-o'-lantern. And the facial area, just like I do with critters, is the place that I want to keep nice and light so you can really see the personality stand out with that cute little face that's carved into the pumpkin. So for that, I'm going to keep it nice and light with my highlight shade, the YR12. So I'm just going to fill in all of that white space, carefully coloring around all of those little cutouts. I want to color those in a lighter shade later, so I want to make sure not to get any of that orange in there. So I'm just doing small little strokes in a circular motion to kind of break up the edge of that YR14 and fill everything in. While I have those marker shades out, I'm also going to color in the two smaller pumpkins. And then for the larger two, I wanted to mix things up by using YR04, YR07, and YR09. This combo is just a bit brighter, and so it's going to create just more, dynamics on the card, so everything isn't quite so one note. And you could also color the pumpkins in some greens or some creams. I had a request on my channel just recently for some cream colored pumpkins, which I will do soon. I had actually already filmed this video before that request came in, or I would have done it on this one, but I will definitely do that very soon. So if you're interested in seeing some different ways to color pumpkins, stay tuned. So like I mentioned, I did the pumpkin stems with YG25, and then for the inside of the jack-o'-lantern's face, I'm using Y11, Y13, and Y15, so he has a nice little glow there. So technically this wouldn't work because if the pumpkin was lit, the kitty probably wouldn't be very comfortable inside, but I just thought it was fun to make him glow for the holidays. I haven't done a jack-o'-lantern yet so far this season, so I just decided to go ahead and do it anyway. It's just a card. So I also colored the moon and stars with those shades, and then I went back over the white spots in his eyes with a white gel pen. And then I will trim all of these images out with their matching dies. For my background, I wanted to create a sunset sky, so I've taken a piece of Bristol smooth surface cardstock, and I'm going to be blending on some Distress Oxide inks. I'm starting with Squeeze Lemonade, and that's going to be my lightest shade down at the bottom. So I'm just going to blend on a good amount of that until I get that cardstock nice and saturated. And then the next shade that I'm going to bring in is Carved Pumpkin, which just seemed very appropriate for today's card. So I'm going to blend that right above the Squeeze Lemonade, and then I will go back and forth to blend that transition area once I have enough of that pigment on the cardstock, just so I get a nice fade between the colors. And then the third shade I'm bringing in is Candied Apple, and I'm going to cover the entire top edge of the card with that, and just blend that on nice and thick. Again, that's a nice fall shade, and then I'm going to go back with that Carved Pumpkin and the Squeeze Lemonade and just blend those transition areas. And then I wanted to darken up the top edge just a bit, so I grabbed my black soot and I'm going over that very softly. I didn't want too much of that, and honestly, when this card gets cut down for later on for the focal panel, most of that is going to disappear, but I just wanted to have a little bit of that. It just adds kind of like a vignette around the edge, so it just focuses your eye towards the center, which I find really nice. I went back over each of those shades once again to just brighten them up, and then I'm going to take some Perfect Pearls in the shade Perfect Pearls, and I'm going to open this up carefully. This one always gets all over when I open it, so I have to be nice and careful. I'm going to squeeze some water into that and mix that up, and then I'm going to flick that all over my surface with a paintbrush, just so I get some nice little flecks that are going to really look cool when you tip them into the light. And then I'm also going to use the shade Perfect Bronze. I thought this was nice for fall. Just add something a little bit extra, so I'm going to do the same thing. I just took a little bit of that out of the container with the back of my paintbrush. Once again, I'm going to water that down, and then I'll flick that all over the surface as well. So when you tip that, you're going to get both some little white droplets that catch the light, and then also some really pretty coppery droplets. So I'll splatter that all over until I get a nice amount of different size drops, and then there you can see how it looks, and it'll be even more cool once it starts to dry. I've also taken one of the Slimline Nature borders and die cut a piece of black licorice cardstock, and I'm going to use some Perfect Pearls that I keep in a mini mister just to give that a little bit of shine as well. For my pattern paper, I'm taking one of the sheets from the Classic Sunburst 6x6, and I die cut that with the Frilly Frames Quatrefoil outer die to get that stitch detail. And then I'm also die cutting that with the stitched semicircle die so I can create a window. So I just taped that die in place with a little bit of post-it tape and then ran that through my Spellbinders Platinum 6. And I also backed that with a piece of cheap white cardstock just to give it a little more stability. I also took a piece from the Colorful Autumn 6x6 pack, and I'm die cutting that with the Slimline Basic Borders, one of the dies in that set, so that I can create a nice decorative edge. And there you can see how that looks, and it was a little too tall, so I trimmed that down slightly, and now I'm going to go ahead and glue that onto my card front, just lining that up with the bottom edge. And then I'm going to set this aside and work on my background. So I've trimmed that down slightly, and now I'm going to adhere that grassy border right over top, just positioning that where I want it. I wanted to get some of that orange, and the yellow is mostly gone, but the orange and the red was what matched the pattern paper better, I thought. So I'm going to add my frame over top. I popped that up with some foam tape. And I'm going to adhere that to a piece of Lawn Fawn apricot cardstock that I've folded to a standard A2 size card, just with the fold at the top. Then I'm going to pop that into my MISTI and stamp a sentiment on the inside. I'm using Lawn Fawn's Fake Tan ink to stamp Happy Halloween and a little mouse from the Harvest Mice and the pumpkin that is shaped like a mouse. For my outer sentiment, I'm taking another strip of the same cardstock that I used on the outside of the card, and I treated that with a powder tool and stamped Hello Pumpkin on there with Versamark ink, and then I coated that with some white embossing powder, and then I'll heat that up with my heat tool until it's nice and white and shiny, and then I'm going to trim that down into a small little strip. And I used a microfiber cloth from Pink and Maine to remove any of that powder tool residue. And now I'm ready to start adhering my images. So I've added some foam tape to the back of the kitty, and I had a little piece that was hanging down, so I just had to tear that off. And then I'm going to take the two larger pumpkins and I'm going to add those with liquid glue. I'm just tucking them back behind the jack-o'-lantern and the edge of that window frame. So I have one on the left and then the other one is going on the right. And then I'll take the two smaller pumpkins and I'm going to adhere those on each side as well, but using a little foam tape to pop those up so they're on the same level as the kitty and the jack-o'-lantern. Then I have a moon and I'm going to adhere that and the 3 stars just flat to that background with some liquid glue because I want those to be a little bit more recessed into the sky, and then your eye will be drawn more towards the kitty in the front. So I just added 3 little drops of glue and then set those stars down in place over top. Then I'll take my sentiment and I'm going to adhere that right below that scalloped border on the orange pattern paper. And that is going to complete my card for today. I'll tip that into the light so you can see how those perfect pearls glow and give you another peek at the inside. So let me know down in the comments if you guys like Halloween cards, if you give them, if you make them. I'd love to know. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe and ring that notification bell so you don't miss a thing. I post new videos every Monday and Friday and often on Wednesdays. Don't forget to check out the description bar below for links to all of the products used today. And if you'd like to keep watching, here are 2 extra videos I thought might also interest you. You can click on either one to check them out. Have a great day. Bye-bye.